In this episode, we look at the toilet of the future, why you might be wishing on celestial skid marks, and Noah goes on an Aristotelian wild deuce chase. Welcome to Fax Machine. Hello, listeners. My name is Rob, and I'm here with my co-hosts Noah.
Hello.
And Emily.
Hi.
Today, we're recording episode number 22, and our focus is number twos. That's right. Today, it's our duty to drop you some fartsicle facts. Yeah, get ready for this.
Fartsicle? Okay. What's that?
Farcical.
But fartsicle.
Oh.
Yeah.
Don't think about a fartsicle too long.
Buckle
frozen
up,
parts.
listeners. It's going to be a rough ride.
But all of our facts today are going to be related to the defecatory process. Each one of us will share one fecal fact, have a little discussion, and then we can have an excremental quiz loosely inspired by the theme. But before we do that, first off, we have a new website.
Heck yeah, we do. So we're at faxmachinepodcast.com, and it features some more info about the podcast, about us, also a full archive of all of our episodes and all sorts of cool supplemental information and research, and a section for news, including about our upcoming live show.
And that is our second fact. We are doing a live show.
Yeah.
And the venue, the date, and the time are all settled. So please come see us live at Caveat on the Lower East Side of New York on Monday, April 29th. The doors open at 9 p.m. Drinks are on Noah.
Hey, whoa, what's up?
Heck yeah, they are.
We decided that in the pre-show meeting, but you weren't here.
Oh, man. Well, guys,
Yes.
can you at least keep
That's
it
what
to one
happens when
drink
you show up
apiece?
late.
No, totally not.
God.
The rest of you can find details and tickets on our website, faxmachinepodcast.com. So you guys can come on down, talk with us after the show. It should be a really fun time at Caveat, and we hope to see you all there. And with that, I'll hand it over to Noah.
This week I learned that meconium, which is the odorless first stool of a newborn human, is said to have been named by Aristotle, who thought that it induced sleep in utero. Yeah.
Okay.
So,
Tell me more.
So, as I mentioned, meconium is the first stool of a newborn baby. And I did a lot of research on this fact. I had to read a lot of, papers written by doctors about meconium. Basically, what meconium is like while the baby is in the uterus, like it sort of just ingests a lot of, material from amniotic fluid. It's just stuff like epithelial cells and mucus, amniotic fluid. But it's also got this weird, like viscous, sticky consistency. And it's also like a very dark color, even like olive green. But what's great about it, according to parents, is that it doesn't smell. And so people always remark they expect like a baby's first poop to smell really bad, as all the rest of them do. But actually, it's sort of unique in that it doesn't smell. What I also mentioned in the fact was that meconium was said to have gotten its name from Aristotle, who thought that it induced sleep in utero. And so this comes from one of Aristotle's books on the history of animals, where he was actually observing sort of midwives help pregnant women give birth. And so on the history of animals, he says, directly they come forth, they cry out and bring their hands to their mouth. There is evacuation of excrement, sometimes at once, sometimes soon, but always within the day. And this excrement is more than accords with the bulk of the child. And I really, honestly, I was not totally sure what that means. I mean, it's more than accords with the bulk of the child. I think it means just like there's a lot more of it than you think.
Disproportionately big poop.
Exactly. So another interesting thing that I learned was that so when I was first reading about this and like all these papers written by like OBGYNs, just doctors talking about the history of meconium, particularly sort of an introductory paragraph to talking about various diseases or syndromes that are related to meconium in medicine, they would always cite Aristotle as having first coined the term, but also didn't cite it at all. So it took me a really long time to dig through, all the literature to try to find where he himself actually did that. And it actually turns out that he did not coin the term, but what really happens is in the next sentence of that part of On the History of Animals, he says, women call it meconium.
Her story.
Yes, exactly. So it was actually that the midwives had given it this name, meconium, And Aristotle just described it, and then historians and people later on, doctors, just ascribed that name to Aristotle.
So surprising.
But
It's fantastic, though.
yeah, so what meconium means is opium. And the reason it means opium is because it's firstly opium as it like came out of the poppy was this black tarry dark substance. And the other reason is that it was thought at the time, and then as recorded by Aristotle, to induce drowsiness in the fetus in the womb. And it was apparently Aristotle, having observed a lot of these births, had said that the meconium present in the amniotic fluid, like during birth, was related to the baby coming out being sort of really like low energy and drowsy. Now we know that meconium being the amniotic fluid is actually really, really bad, and you can get something called meconium inhalation syndrome, which is really dangerous. But yeah, so it's something that doctors are concerned about even today. But reading about this, it got me thinking, like Aristotle, obviously, anyone who studies anything basically has heard about Aristotle. He made fundamental contributions in the early history of science to physics and biology and philosophy. So basically any major in college, you can read about Aristotle.
I was going to say any major in college is the title of a book by Aristotle.
Is it really?
I mean, almost. I was looking on his Wikipedia page to prepare for almost, guys. He didn't write a book called
real
Women's
quick there.
Studies. I'm sorry. But I definitely, I was looking through all the titles, and it was like rhetoric, physics, like astronomy, like every major that you could come across was like one of the tabs on Aristotle's Wikipedia page.
Anyway, reading about like what Aristotle was saying about poop, this weird question got in the back of my head, and it was basically just, what else has Aristotle said about poop? And this led me on like a crazy just adventure trying to read through like every work by Aristotle, like searching as many different terms for poop as I could find. Like in
So
the
it
document.
was a wild goose chase.
Oh my god! Why do you have to ruin everything?
You're just waiting to drop that one, weren't you?
Oh jeez.
But one of the things I found, it was this really, really cool book by Aristotle. And the real name of this, guys, I swear I'm not making this up, is Sense and Sensibilia. And you may recognize...
Sounds familiar.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It sounds a lot like Sense and Sensibility by Jane Austen. Mm-hmm. I'm not accusing her of plagiarism. I don't think that book is that much about poop. But this book talks about it. So Sense and Sensibilia basically is translated obviously from the Greek, but it really means like sense and the things that can be sensed. So he was talking about sight, taste, touch, hearing, smell, right? And so if you had to guess, in which of those would you think that he talks about poop? Just honestly, what's your honest guess?
Smell.
That's a perfectly reasonable guess. But it's taste.
Oh no.
I swear to God, I read this whole thing, and the only time I could find that he talks about poop is in the taste section. And it's kind of important for background to understand that Aristotle has this concept that goes throughout his work of the golden mean. And so basically what this is he believes that a lot of the qualities that you can describe to everything, be it like personality or just physical characteristics of objects, have two extremes. And what you want to be is in the middle. So for example, courage, right? Courage, if you're right in the middle of the two extremes, you're brave. But if you have too much courage, you're reckless. If you have too little, you're too timid. So every personality trait, every object lies somewhere on the spectrum between two extremes. So where poop comes in is he was talking about how in taste, most things in his mind, there are two main tastes in opposition. He thought they were sweet and bitter. Now, today, we know that there are 5 tastes. Do you guys know what they are?
Ooh, yes. Sweet, sour, bitter, salty, and umami.
Yeah, umami is the last one. Most recently described early 20th century, but Aristotle thought that there were 2 main tastes in opposition, so sweet and bitter, and that all the other tastes sort of lie on the spectrum between those. So what he says is, quote, heat causes growth and fits the foodstuff for alimentation. And here, alimentation means like nutritive quality. It attracts into the organic system that which is light, for example, the sweet, while the salt and bitter it rejects because of their heaviness. Something that he's saying here basically is that things that are sweet at one extreme, also fit in on this other extreme, that is between light versus heavy. So Aristotle believes that things that taste sweet literally float in your stomach and aren't heavy enough to be weighed down so they go all the way through your intestines. So what you have to do, even though sweet tastes the best and bitter doesn't taste good, what you have to do is include some bitterness so that it will be weighed down and the sweetness can go into your bloodstream, right? Sweet carbohydrates are obviously nutritive. A lot of our system works on, having glucose available so, it can do stuff in the body. I'm a scientist. And
Basically, he's saying the exact opposite of what Mary Poppins was saying, and that you need a spoonful of bitterness to make the sugar go down.
Yes, exactly. So basically what Aristotle is saying is that the digestive system wants to take all the sweet things out of what we've eaten and leave everything behind that's salty or bitter. So he's implying there that poop tastes bitter. And I'm not the only person who thinks this, because Thomas Aquinas, writing in the commentary on Aristotle's Sense and Sensibilia, says that the body prepares nourishment by digesting inasmuch as it draws out what is light and sweet and leaves what is salty and bitter because of its heaviness, which is why all feces of animals are quite bitter or salty.
Well, there you go.
Okay.
I guess it's better than tasting it, which is really where I thought this was going. That if you arrive at this conclusion by logic, even if you're wrong, it's better than eating shit.
Well, I mean, so listen though. Thomas Aquinas clearly states, which is why all feces of animals are quite bitter or salty. Mm-hmm. So somebody has come to that conclusion.
That phrasing suggests that it has been tried.
And the only way that Aristotle could have known that all the sweetness came out of it is by tasting feces.
Yeah.
And knowing that it was
There's
bitter.
the rub.
Oh, okay. So I also looked into Aristotle a little bit for the things that he had written. And I found one that I found really interesting. So he fancied himself a bit of a biologist, or I'd say it wasn't his strong suit necessarily. In this same tome, he classified all animals into either having bones or lacking blood. And those are the two types of animals.
Sweet versus bitter, bones versus blood.
All right.
But there's just two parallel lines of blood but no bones, bones but no blood. What about those? So in this same, and also if you're a bloodless animal, he called them cephalopods, which is immensely confusing reading his works because that's not what cephalopods necessarily are.
No, but he does actually describe. I read a lot. He does actually specifically.
Wait, not just about poop?
No, not.
Wow,
I
you're well-rounded.
I actually read things that Aristotle wrote that weren't about poop, and one of the things was he actually describes cephalopods as and calls them cephalopods, basically like head feet, because he describes them as a head out of which some tentacles grow. Yeah.
I mean, I'm definitely not here to knock Aristotle, but I will say I think in his biology he has a couple inaccuracies. One of which I really liked, though, was he in his classification of souls, he talks about the souls of living things. So there's the vegetative soul, which belongs to a plant. And then there's the soul of animals, which he calls the sensitive soul, which is different than the rational soul of humans. And I don't know if you're like me, but when you hear the term sensitive soul, who do you think of?
Me? Is it me, Rob?
Oh no, because this is such an important bridge to tie this all back to our theme.
What is it?
Sensitive soul?
Okay, if I said, I'm a sensitive soul,
Oh boy.
but I seem thick-skinned. And it hurt that my friends never stood downwind.
No, the shame.
He was ashamed.
I still don't get it.
Mention my name. And
I got downhearted.
Yes.
Every time that Oh, Pumbaa, not in front of the kids.
It's Pumbaa, Noah. Pumbaa from the Lion King.
And it's
Under the sea. Under the sea.
But-
Baby,
Almost
it's
there.
better. Down where it's wetter. Take it from me.
Oh boy.
basically the point I'm making is Aristotle called animals sensitive souls. Pumbaa is an animal from the Lion King.
Oh.
Pumbaa farts a lot.
Oh, nice.
Boom. Connected all the dots.
Yeah. Therefore,
It's so simple.
Aristotle wrote the Lion King.
Wow. He really could do it all. So I just kind of took the angle for an extra fact here of looking into Aristotle and babies and did find a surprising link, not only between Aristotle and babies, but also between Aristotle and baby making. So there's this book called Aristotle's Masterpiece. Aristotle's Masterpiece was a best-selling 17th to 19th century, because it had multiple editions over those centuries, sex and pregnancy guide with an unknown author who was not Aristotle but claimed to be Aristotle.
Well,
So-
I think if he was claiming it, you know it wasn't Aristotle.
Exactly.
If it was between the 17th and 19th centuries and someone was like, I'm Aristotle, that's their first clue.
It's like, hey guys, have you read the new Aristotle?
It's like Tupac. They just keep releasing them forever.
Exactly. You found the flaw right away. So a while back in this podcast, we had hashtag Fakespeare. So now I'd like to offer hashtag Aristotle, but like with ERR, like an error.
That's
Get
good.
it? All right, we'll
I
roll
love
with
it.
So the reason that this book was ascribed to Aristotle was actually that he was considered a sex expert in England at the time, and Aristotle itself was actually slang for carnal knowledge or smut. So if you saw the word Aristotle on a book in the Victorian era, you knew what you were in for.
I thought you said that Aristotle was slaying. That he was a sex expert and Aristotle
based on the
was
book
slaying.
sales, he kind of was. But it's actually apocryphal that the book was banned in England until the 1960s. While it was never formally banned, given its obscene contents, it certainly wasn't in the front windows of any bookshops either. So the third edition of the book, and the most widely known one, came out in the 19th century, and it was written to contain some modern knowledge about the subject of sex and pregnancy and biology, but also purposefully contained some outdated information, so including home remedies or old wives' tales, just as a joke and also to kind of lend credence to the idea that it was written by Aristotle many centuries before. It was still the most accurate piece of literature about sexuality available at the time. So I will say that it did get some things right, and it also got some things very bizarrely wrong. So among things that it got right were the symptoms of pregnancy. It was also a pretty helpful guide for midwives regarding child delivery and also featuring anatomical depictions of the womb. It did say that a torn hymen does not equal a non-virgin. Pretty cool. Also offered tips on, in quotes, the use and actions of the genitals. So essentially the mechanics of sex, but also stressed that mutual pleasure is needed for conception, which, while not necessarily true, is solid advice. Hashtag woke Aristotle.
Wow. I have to say,
make it trending.
the use and actions of the genitals is the least sexy way to describe sex that I've ever heard.
What? That's not typical foreplay talk for you. Hey, girl.
Would you like to use or act upon my genitals?
Personally, the least sexy way I've ever heard genitals described was Rob's Aristotle fan fiction.
Oh, you found that?
Yeah.
Oh, jeez. This week, I learned that researchers are exploring the possibility of recycling astronaut poop into astronaut food.
No.
Yeah. Now, I know that sounds really gross, but to be honest, it is. It's quite gross. In fact, it's actually more gross than you're probably already imagining. But conceptually, it's also really cool, especially given that longer, farther shuttle journeys and initiatives to settle Mars are becoming a less distant reality every day. Our plans to explore uncharted celestial territory and book shuttle flights without a return ticket have created a demand for tech that'll allow astronauts to live solely off of what they can carry, while also avoiding accumulation of any additional stuff that'll weigh them down. So to address this demand, NASA researchers have been developing new and creative strategies to maximize allocation of cargo space while also minimizing waste. The solution? Make as many resources that astronauts depend on reusable and self-sustaining. Or, to sum it up in a way that brings us back to our fact, when you're trying to save space, in space, a poo is a terrible thing to waste. So to add a little context here, the idea of recycling human waste in space is not a new one. The ISS actually reclaims about 93% of the water they use with a special conditioning system that purifies it from various input sources, including urine, gray water, sweat, and even water vapor. But we currently don't have a sophisticated system for handling number twos. Instead, astronaut dookies are simply launched into space. Yeah, and I learned that from a surprisingly tongue-in-cheek infographic that NASA released in 2015, summarizing all sorts of milestones that astronaut Scott Kelly would achieve during his record-breaking year in space. Do you guys want to hear some of these milestones?
Absolutely.
Please.
So, forewarning, they might make you feel really strangely inadequate as a person. So, one of them is astronaut Scott Kelly saw 10,944 sunrises and sunsets during his hashtag year in space, and we only saw 684, which I didn't feel bad about until now. Thanks, NASA. Also, per the infographic, they estimated that about 383 experiments would be conducted during his hashtag year in space, including some created by Nobel laureates. Now, as a grad
my
student,
God.
that one especially stings, and I really hope my PI isn't listening and getting any ideas. And the relevant one to this fact is that Scott Kelly produced about 180 pounds of feces that will burn up in the atmosphere and look like shooting stars. Our feces would not be shooting stars.
Pooting stars.
Oh, God.
I'm assuming that's meant to be motivating, like in a, hey kids, if you stay in school and study hard, maybe one day your poop can also create bright, majestic skid marks across the night sky. I don't know. Not sure what their angle was, but it's interesting.
That's definitely the best PR on that ever. Instead of poop rains down from heaven.
It's all about the spin. But in digging through piles of information on this subject, I discovered that ideas to use astronaut waste for purposes other than poop comets have actually been around for decades. The oldest idea I found came from, of all places, a tweet by Avery Trufelman, a producer on 99% Invisible and the creator of the fantastic series Articles of Interest, which I love, can't recommend enough. But essentially, her tweet brought up a 1960s proposal by Boeing to use astronaut waste as fertilizer to grow algae. This algae could then be ground into a flour-like substance and repurposed for food, such as she pointed out in her all-caps tweet, poop muffins. Though, given the nausea, vomiting, and uncontrollable diarrhea, in quotes, experienced by Soylent customers when algal flour was introduced in version 1.6 of the product, it was removed from version 1.7. It's probably for the best that this idea went down the toilet. Various non-food related uses for astronaut poo have also been proposed, including incinerating it to produce fertilizer for gardening in lunar or Martian soil, lining spacecraft with it to shield astronauts from cosmic radiation, and feeding algae grown from it to a strain of genetically modified yeast that can then metabolize it into plastics for 3D printing. So apart from uses as fertilizer or for 3D printing, there's also been a renewed interest in recovering nutrition from astronaut dumps and then repackaging it back into astronaut dinners. Now, you'd think that, considering all the technological leaps and bounds humanity has achieved since this idea was proposed in the 60s, by now we'd have come up with a comparatively less stomach-turning proposition than poop muffins. Well,
Every time it gets me.
it's a great phrase. Well, that's where you'd be wrong. In a 2018 study, researchers from the Penn State Department of Geosciences and Astrobiology Research Center described a method of anaerobic digestion by which bacteria could convert feces to methane. This methane could then feed another type of bacteria called Methylococcus capsulatus, and these bacteria could be harvested as, from the paper, a protein and lipid-rich biomass that can be directly consumed or used to produce other high-protein food sources such as fish. Oh. And the authors found that certain bacterial species that thrive in extreme conditions like high heat or alkalinity could also be grown into a nutritious biomass in this same manner, which is actually pretty cool because then you don't have to worry about pathogenic interlopers that can't survive the aforementioned extreme conditions, contaminating the biomass and making astronauts who eat it sick.
Interesting.
So, sounds like these researchers have figured it out. They've come up with an ingenious way to supplement astronauts' diets with a nutrient-rich snack while also reducing the amount of poo we thoughtlessly chuck into space. Awesome. It would be the perfect solution were it not for one appetite-killing problem. Christopher House, a co-author of the study, describes the edible biomass as such. It's a little strange, but the concept would be a little bit like Marmite or Vegemite, where you're eating a smear of microbial goo.
So I just found a couple other things about where poop has been used for the powers of good, possibly in space, possibly back here on Earth. So there's a little write-up in the BBC about places where poop could be used to help astronauts. One I found really interesting, which was poop is something that will accumulate over time, so you could use it to fix a chronic problem, like building a radiation shield. and you could just
Oh, yeah.
literally line the walls of your spaceship with poop so that less and less radiation gets through.
I would rather die from radiation.
Just like, oh, I'll just smear this over here, and that's good for later.
From what I saw, it's not like exposed inside of the space shuttle.
Yeah, I think they
Like
pack
just
it
a
in.
cavern with like stalactites of poop.
Stalactites.
Yes. Fantastic.
Another one that's really interesting, more kind of earthbound is, and I've read about this before and even heard about it on other podcasts, but they estimate that the amount of valuable metals lost in human waste every year is approximately $13 million.
Wow.
Whoa.
And so an Arizona State University professor, Dr. Paul Westerhoff, says the majority of that actually can be concentrated from certain areas, specifically where dentists live, because they're coming through the sewage that derives from domestic dentist office because they had caps and fillings made out of gold and silver.
Oh,
And so
interesting.
it's often been written that the value of that gold, $13 million, would cost more than that to extract.
Yeah.
But if you just went to the blocks that dentists lived on and did like the cheapest, quickest process, you might actually be able to make money out of extracting the gold and silver.
I love that this like Arizona State professor is basically just some prospector going like, "There's gold and then there's stools."
But the best and worst example for me was about using poop for transport fuel. And I think we may have mentioned it earlier in the episode, but actually producing methane, which is a simple byproduct from human feces, can actually be turned into a usable gas fuel. Now, I actually found out about this company a little while ago, and there's one problem. I'm going to tell you what they do. They're a group called First Group Transport Company. They run a bus in the United Kingdom powered by poo that runs back and forth from an airport. The name of this organization is the BioBus,
Oh no.
which is the name of the science education company that I work for in New York City. But the bio that they're talking about is extremely different.
Well, I think hold on. I think this is the moment where you should contact them and tell them that they should change their name to the Magic Stool Bus.
So this week I learned scientists have invented a toilet that vaporizes your poop and it could save millions of gallons of water.
Nice.
Yeah, sounds pretty good. And that might not even be the coolest way scientists are improving toilets right now, but we'll get to that later. First, I want to adjust the visual that you're having about vaporizing poop.
Thank you.
Because I'm pretty sure that, like, when I first read this, it was like a Martian with a laser gun just pointing it at poop and it was disappearing. So if anyone else had that same visual, it's not like that. Okay, now that we've settled that. This is a story about a scientist named Diana Youssef who created a waterless toilet and the company Change: Water Labs. I say colon because it's inexplicably in the title of Change Water Labs, and also because it has to do with poop. Change Water Labs, they've dubbed themselves as they're a science company. They're also essentially like a poop treatment company, so they're kind of a sanitation company, but they've dubbed themselves a sewage logistics optimization business. Which is just the best nonsense name for something that just gets rid of poop. But all credit to them because they have a great technology. So the tech actually involves water wicking polymers. So these are plastics that they kind of invented and they synthesized themselves. Basically what happens, an individual would use one of these specialized toilets. Their waste would fall into this polymer package at the bottom, and it would slowly, actually, the water would be taken out of it because of just being in contact with the surrounding plastic. The water vapor, as it gets pulled out through the plastic, then gets released as water vapor gas. The solid waste is essentially condensed into a hard, liquid-free waste package that's wrapped in the polymer, kind of on all sides. And this casing should be big enough to last a family of 5 to 6, about 2 weeks.
Sorry, wait. Are they eating it? What are they doing?
Well, I think the implication is that like in their bathroom, like it can collect like that amount of time of poop for a family
Yeah.
of that
Okay,
size.
because you say like you can last a family for 6 weeks. That usually means they guns to be snacking on it.
On poop alone.
But also, Emily just talked about that, so
No, it's definitely seated in your mind.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But such a toilet with one of these polymer cases on the bottom could be used by a family of 5 to 6 for about 2 weeks before the polymer had to be replaced. And so this end result is this like really densely plastic wrapped solid waste product has been called by the lab shrink wrap for crap. And this is their
Why don't they just call it shrink crap?
shrink crap. Oh, wow.
Oh, man.
Let's write them an email.
Wow.
Let's make some bills.
We're naming so
And
many
you know
things in
what?
this
And what their
podcast.
their tagline could be, "What a waste."
amazing.
You guys can use that.
Yeah. Because
If you're listening out there,
Anyone-
clean dot what was it? Colon
clean water labs.
clean
There
colon
you
water
go.
labs. That's all yours.
It's a
You're
freebie.
welcome.
Go for it.
But so they have a globalization plan for this crap shrink wrapping or shrink crapping process, which they hope can actually like be used all around the world at low cost. Right now, they think each pouch would cost somewhere between $3 and $15, depending on how their synthesis goes. And it's a completely new type of fecal disposal system. Because the two that are kind of currently extant in the world are kind of smelly compost waste collections and also latrine collections, which are a little bit less noxious, but they are high maintenance. You have to clean out latrines and sewage pits. And so both of them have a cost benefit, but neither one of them is quite as convenient of having just water wicking plastic take all the water out of your solid, create a solid waste. And actually, this is a process that we may talk about later, is very costly even in industrialized nations to reduce waste down into like a solid and kind of manageable brick. The polymer membrane they think could do other things too on an industrial and commercial level. It could be applied as wastewater treatment for bigger nations, for cities like New York. It could also be used to filter out pharmaceutical products so that you could remove antibiotics and other harmful things that are ruining our environment because of how much humans use them, things like dyes and medical waste. And finally, there's the potential for kind of optimizing it for off-grid desalinization projects to create clean water from salt water. So this is all really exciting things that you can do with this water-wicking polymer. So the cool thing in reading about this is it actually reminded me of another cost-saving mechanism for saving water while taking poops. So I was at a talk at the Museum of Natural History this year where I saw the speaker talking about something called SLIPS polymers. And so that is a clever acronym for slippery, liquid-infused, porous surfaces. They were developed by the Weiss Institute, and the speaker was one of the primary inventors who's now moved and started his own lab. And what it does is it's created an essentially friction-free surface. So he did a lot of kind of mechanical and materials testings on this to show that it was like essentially friction-free and how things interacted with it. And his videos were just incredible. So we're all familiar with how bugs, particularly ants, are very good at climbing up the sides of things.
Yeah.
Right.
And you can
yeah.
imagine like ants in a petri dish maybe climbing up the sides of the plastic or glass wall. They came upon this slips coated surface and they just like slipped and fell. We're completely unable to do anything with it. He went on to show what this surface looked like, and actually its applications for things like blood smears and collecting blood. And so he put a drop of liquid on the surface of a slide that was coated in this. And in a way that I've never seen and like can't actually describe to you, you're familiar with how a droplet of water would run across a surface, right?
Yeah.
And you can imagine if you reduce the friction of that surface, the droplet would run much quicker and it might become lower to the glass and kind of actually just speed along.
Wasn't it that isn't the surface just really hydrophobic? Wasn't that kind of the point?
Exactly. And so essentially what happens is a drop of water on this surface will disperse the droplet flat and it will just kind of run over it without interacting with the surface at all.
Wow.
And so this technology is derived from a plant, actually.
Huh.
So it's the surface of a plant that makes a very unique kind of surface texture. It's called a pitcher plant.
Oh, Nepenthes.
Yes.
Yes.
The botanist in you is really coming out now.
Yes. I'm genuinely amazed that this has come up because Nepenthes actually has this fascinating other behavior that is incredibly relevant to both what you're talking about with toilets and also the broader poop fact. And it's that it has a mutualistic relationship with the mountain tree shrew. So both these, they live in Borneo in Indonesia. And basically what happens is that, just like you said before, where the insects go up to try to get the nectar, this tree shrew is, I guess, adapted in some way to be able to get to the nectar without falling in. And it can only get to it in such a way that it is positioned over the mouth of the pitcher plant so that it defecates into the bowl of the pitcher plant, and the pitcher plant uses the feces to sort of as nutrients along with all the insects and stuff it gets in. So not only is this really interesting because scientists have used the side of this to improve toilets, it also is a toilet for other animals.
It's ridiculous.
It's so amazing.
Oh, wow. I had no idea about that fact. But yeah, that's the second way that like toilets could be materially improved by increasing or changing the polymers that they're made out of. So it's either have a toilet that takes all the water out of your poo, or take all the water out of your toilet and just have the poo slide away on its own.
Has anyone tried to go the other direction and just like put a mountain tree shrew in everyone's home?
I think that's
or would that not help?
It's the next logical step, I think.
Obviously.
So, you know how they say that shit always runs downhill?
Where is this going?
Downhill. Pay attention. Well, there's one place that it doesn't, and it's actually a really big problem. Mount Everest.
Oh,
Yeah,
interesting.
It's very problematic there.
A
And that's-
famous hill.
It's a mild understatement. So, as you know, a lot of people go up there and spend a lot of time up there, especially at the base camp, where climbers spend months acclimatizing and pooping. So to put some numbers to that, about 4,500 people have been up there since Tenzing Norgay Sherpa and Sir Edmund Hillary's trip in 1953, and that equates to about 26,000 pounds of poop per year, or 12 tons.
That's a lot.
That's a shit ton.
Or converted, a shit ton. And because there's no plumbing on top of the tallest peak on Earth, go figure, all of that poop has to be carried back down and disposed of somewhere. And that somewhere is actually a village at the base of the mountain called Gorak Shep. So the poop is collected in plastic-lined barrels and brought down by Sherpas or yaks, where it's dumped into open pits. And as these pits fill up, as pits of shit are wont to do, the waste has had to be disposed of in other places, including along a river. And that river tends to flood, exactly, during the monsoon season, resulting in runoff, which has actually caused Gorak Shep's sources of drinking water to become contaminated on multiple occasions. So, an effort to reduce the environmental impact of Mount Everest climbers, or more specifically by their byproducts, has been undertaken by the Mount Everest Biogas Project, which was started by a Seattle-based engineer and Everest climber named Gary Porter. So, the premise of the project was to construct a biogas reactor at Gorak Shep, into which waste could be dumped along with a whole bunch of bacteria. And basically, the bacteria eat the poop and then produce gases like methane, which is the main ingredient of natural gas, so it can also be burned for light or heat or even converted into electricity. And they actually employed some pretty cool engineering adaptations to the biogas reactor for the local conditions of being on Mount Everest. So, for example, the reactor has to be kept at the right temperature, specifically 20 to 30 degrees Celsius, for bacteria to survive. And they achieve this with solar panels to warm it up. And the reactor is also constructed to be earthquake resistant. And actually, the builders of the reactor also hope that the methane produced by it can alleviate another problem that climbers create by serving as cooking fuel. So, as we said, there's lots of climbers, and they need to eat, so they can poop. The locals have had to turn to alternate sources of cooking fuel, such as alpine juniper, which is actually an endangered species, to keep up with that demand. So, the idea is that that methane and natural gas can fuel cooking instead of endangered species, which is always a pretty nice thing.
Yeah.
And actually, as an update to this project, as of last year, they have approval from the Sagarmatha Pollution Control Committee, which is a local NGO responsible for cleaning up Mount Everest, and they just need to raise the necessary funds. The first reactor is estimated to cost $500,000. That being said, if you'd like to help with this or donate, you can do so at mounteverestbiogasproject.org. That's MT Everest Biogas Project. I don't know. Small plug for hopefully plugging up the poop. No, forget it. Nope. I'm just going to back away from that one.
So that brings us to today's quiz. I don't know if you guys were ready for a poop quiz.
Poop quiz!
Ah, yes. So all of today's questions are going to be somewhat lavatorial in nature. We'll tell you they are from a broad range of sources. So somewhere in the fact is poop. Question number 1. In July 2017, a Ventura County, California man was arrested because he didn't flush the toilet. What else was he doing while pooping?
This is a very broad question.
Texting?
No.
Is it something normal? No. Okay.
Gosh, I have no idea. And you said this was easy.
Well, so I said he was arrested because he didn't flush the toilet.
Does that mean that he didn't poop in a toilet?
He did, in fact, which was, in hindsight, a dumb thing to do.
Oh, I know it. It must have been in like a Home Depot or something on one of like the display toilets.
No, that's not it at all.
Wait, what?
That's definitely what it could be.
I mean, sure, it could be. I guess the problem, he was arrested for doing something else, and then pooping was the thing that that did him in the end.
Was it... So he committed a crime, but is he identified by DNA from the poop that was left in the toilet?
That is correct.
Okay. But he
He
committed
murdered someone on the toilet.
Committed this crime while pooping.
Did he kill someone, go to their bathroom, poop, and then leave without flushing?
Okay, so basically, except he's not that bad of a guy. He just he didn't kill anyone. So the crime he was actually arrested for was breaking and entering.
Okay. I don't know why I went straight to murder. Well, he was arrested for it. Probably death. Probably death of the person.
Because Psycho would poop in someone's house and leave. Must be a murderer.
Exactly.
But this is the case of Andrew Jensen, who did his business and didn't flush after breaking into a home and stealing from the owners of the house. The poop actually helped close a cold case murder in Ventura County from 1997 as well. So there was a poop-related murder solved.
So how did the detectives...
Well, the poop was recovered from the toilet, tested for DNA immediately, and then they realized that they had kept poop from a 1997 case, and they retested that in 2014, and that's how they actually caught the Ventura County murderer.
Wow.
So question number 2. This one, yeah, our favorite.
Wow.
Every question's question number 2 tonight.
Yeah.
In the 1914 classic book, American Sewerage Practice, ...
Okay.
And that's it. There's nothing after
The
the ellipse.
ellipsis is in... okay.
Yes.
Wait, really?
Yes, American Sewage Practice. The authors noted an interesting trend. And so the authors noted that the per capita sewage in one U.S. city was double the volume of most other major cities. Perhaps they're using all that water to grow giant beans.
Oh, it's Chicago.
This is Chicago.
Oh,
Yeah.
now I get it. Okay.
So for no particular reason and for nothing that I could find in all of my reading of the free ebook version of American Sewerage Practice, which is several hundred pages long and through which I actually went through a lot of the charts. It's such an interesting book. So Chicago then claimed about 242 gallons per capita per day. That's more than double the city of Boston and most other cities like that are graphed in this chart at any point in the year. Question number 3. This one I really enjoyed. I also, on the side, hope that you guys didn't read things that I've sent out in the past too closely.
I've never read anything you've sent me. After all that Aristotle fan fiction.
Learn your lesson.
All right, so question number 3 is, according to science, to the nearest 0.25 of a day, how many days does it take to poop out a Lego man's head?
I don't even know what to say.
Well, to the listeners, I actually sent Noah and Emily an article that said, in the title, it takes this long to poop out a Lego man's head. Like,
What?
not even a month ago.
Really?
Yes.
Oh, you totally did. Right. And
I was
then
just-
you were like, we had to do a poop episode. And then I just completely didn't think about it ever again.
I was
Okay.
seriously banking on the fact that you always ignore me, and then I put in the quiz.
Oh, man. Rob, the quiz isn't supposed to have a moral to it. Come on. Okay.
Noah's checking his email now.
Okay, let's say 4.
All right, fine.
Okay. So to the nearest 0.25 of a day, you are wrong.
Okay.
It is actually 1.71 days.
Okay.
Which
I
is
was gonna say 2.
But so if you compare that to like the medical data that exists, so there's actually a lot of medical data for how long it takes for certain coins to pass through the bodies of children. And most of them take around 2 weeks, actually. So a pediatrician, if you swallow a quarter, will say sometime in the next 2 weeks, like, you'll get your
wow.
money back. Not from this visit, though. I hope your health insurance covers it.
Yeah, we don't accept poop coins as copays.
But so someone at the website, the medical blog, Don't Forget the Bubbles, decided that no one had looked into the particular object of a Lego man's head. They recruited volunteers to swallow the plastic head of a Lego figurine, and then every day they examined their poo to see how long it took. So the Forbes author Bruce Lee, no, not that Bruce
Not
Lee,
that one. Okay.
reported that each participant kept a 3-day stool log, rating their bowel movements using the stool hardness and transit score, or SHAT score. And a person with a higher SHAT score had looser and more frequent bowel movements.
Wow.
After swallowing the Lego head, each participant was responsible for analyzing their own poo to locate the object. A variety of techniques were used, which we don't need to go into here, how to analyze your own poo for Lego heads. But they included tongue depressors, gloves, chopsticks, and the article says, quote, "No turd was left unturned."
I think we didn't need to go into it here.
That was a brush over.
Okay.
So after retrieving the Lego head, the participants calculated their found and retrieved time, or their fart score.
This is not real. This is real. I don't believe this.
The research appears in the Journal of Pediatrics and Child Health. 2 quick takeaways. No correlation between shat and fart scores. Statistically not significant.
Unless you're running a marathon. Oh, we've all talked about this. That actually so we were all watching the New York City Marathon last year. This is a personal aside. I'm sure you were all like, "Why is he telling us this story?" But we the three of us were watching the New York City Marathon, and we looked across the street where people were running by, and on the other side where the crowd was, there was somebody holding up a sign that said, "Never trust a fart after mile 16."
Oh my god. Oh, wise words. All right, question number 4. My goodness. What book was the first to offer the general advice, don't shit where you eat?
It's got to be like the Bible.
Just in some sort of biblical verse.
I mean, I don't know. I think it's going to be something ancient. It could be like the Bible, or
It's a pretty timeless lesson.
It could even be like, something Aristotle wrote. Or,
Or the Aristotle books.
I mean,
you
no. The
cited
thing is,
earlier.
I'm pretty sure I may be about to setting myself up for embarrassment, but I'm pretty sure I read everything Aristotle's ever written about poop. So I don't think it would be him, but I don't know. It could definitely be the Bible. It could be some weird thing like, and he remembering what the Lord had saideth about not pooping where thou shalt eat.
Well, there are some sections of the Bible that offer sort of religious advice that's actually disguised as, at least for the time, like practical survival and hygienic advice. So that might be one of those
Reaping
sorts
what you
of
sow
situations.
is farming advice.
We'll go with it.
Is it the Bible?
The good book.
It is the Bible.
Nice.
And you guys
Cool.
pretty much, you nailed it in terms of where. So it's either Deuteronomy or Leviticus, basically.
There we go. Yep.
So I'll give you the
Dude,
perfect.
Deuteronomy.
Oh my god.
Or Leviticus. But in Deuteronomy, so the one translation is, choose a place outside the camp for a latrine, which is perhaps the simplest and least kind of explicit version of it. It goes into great detail because you must have a place outside the camp to go and relieve yourself. And you must have a digging tool in your equipment so that when you relieve yourself, you can dig a hole and cover up your excrement. So that's one explicit piece of advice for when you're in a camp, specifically at a time of war, but that probably refers to any time, such that the camp is a sacred place because the Lord is with you. And so you must leave the camp to poo. So I just want to be clear, because the Bible is a little bit euphemized, probably in our modern versions. So this is not to be confused with discharges and the uncleanliness of man or woman that's later explained in Leviticus, where they say to the Israelites, the man has a bodily discharge, and the discharge is unclean. Anyone who touches his bed must wash his clothes, and he will be unclean until evening.
Buddy, this isn't about poop.
I know.
Okay. Okay, I'm glad.
And
I didn't have to explain to you what it's about, but I guess you're going to explain to us what it's about right now.
We don't need to. The thing I wanted to bring up, though, was that, like, for poop, there's no timeline, but specifically for this specific male discharge, everything is unclean until evening. Like,
Until
there's
evening.
a laundry list of things that are just like, well, if you touch it, you're unclean until evening.
Well, the laundry list does include his bed sheets.
We need not go through all the details now, or talk about any of the women's health concerns in this book.
Ever.
Yeah.
All right, question number 5. In the 2000s, the streets of the city of Dakar were rife with human waste because the collection of human waste was too expensive as it was subject to the actions of a poop cartel. I'll tell you more about that. Your question is merely...
The weirdest cartels in this podcast.
I love it, though. Your question is merely tell me, in what country is the city of Dakar?
Oh.
I think you used it in your mixed up capitals trivia round in the past.
Is it Senegal?
Yes.
Okay,
that's it.
yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah,
Nice.
so it is the capital of Senegal. Very nice. So this is a wild story, actually, that I lifted from the NPR Planet Money podcast about the poop cartel and their price-fixing scheme for cleaning out septic tanks in Dakar. So what they talk about is how Dr. Molly Lipscomb of UVA, an economist, actually went to Dakar to try to undo this cartel so that the prices would fall to levels where people could afford them. Because what was happening was they couldn't afford removal, so they just disposed of their own waste in the street or in unsanitary ways. Basically, the drivers had all made a pact to not charge less than a certain number, but she created a text or phone-based application in which you could ask for poop removal privately, and they wouldn't have to admit to their other drivers that they were taking less money. So this poop summoning phone app was essentially Poober. But it actually worked. It succeeded in reducing the overall price and kind of undoing this unofficial cartel that was holding the price of poop at an outrageously high number for removal. So, yeah, it's a cool story.
Interesting.
Question number 6. This one is just a kind of nostalgic question that I really like. But what recent sequel, as part of a film series, had several movie critics call it one big pile of shit, employing a little bit of nostalgia to berate all the film's shortcomings?
Oh, is it one of the Jurassic Park movies? It's what, Jurassic World?
Yeah, so it's the most recent Jurassic World, Fallen Kingdom.
Okay.
There are so many problems with the character development, the plot lines, why they built an amusement park on a volcanic island, like so many things that basically couldn't and shouldn't be answered in the course of a movie that critics really tore it apart. But they called back to one of the kind of best scenes of the original Jurassic Park movie, where they're looking at a humongous pile of Triceratops poop, and Jeff Goldblum delivers the line in his classic manner, "That's one big pile of shit."
Not to mention the scene where the guy's sitting on the toilet and the Tyrannosaurus eats him.
That's true. That is a very poop-centered movie, isn't it?
There's a lot about poop in that.
Surprisingly.
Is that also that scene you mentioned? Is that also the one where they hear the phone ringing in the pile of dinosaur shit? That might have been in one of the sequels. I think where they're looking for like their satellite phone. I think this is the one where they parachute into the dinosaur island, and then they're looking for their satellite phone, which they had lost because somebody got eaten and was holding it, and they found the pile of Tyrannosaurus poop or something, and then they hear like the do 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 do, and then they have to like reach in and get it out.
Was that Lost World?
I think it's like the second or third
Oh,
one.
the third one, okay.
Yeah.
Question number 7. I'm going to give you a true or false question in this quiz. True or false? Chewing gum can help decrease the amount of gas that you fart.
What do you think, Emily?
I'm going to go with false.
So from a Vox.com article, they claim that there are several things that can increase the amount you fart daily, and one of those things is chewing gum. Chewing leads to inadvertent swallowing of air,
Exactly.
and according to Puma Kashyap at the Mayo Clinic, that volume is 0.5 liter to 1.5 liters of gas a day.
Damn.
That's citing a 1991 article in the journal Gut. So, yeah, if you want to decrease the amount that you fart, just try chewing a little less gum. And if you don't chew gum ever, well,
That's not the reason.
that's bad.
Maybe try cutting out dairy.
All right, and we're on to question number 8. This is a New York history question. From 1992 to 2012, what centennial state did New York City ship all of our human waste sludge to in order to be repurposed as fertilizer?
What is meant by centennial state? That it earned its statehood? What does that mean?
So
Yeah.
I'll tell you what it means is that the centennial state gained statehood in 1876, the 100th anniversary of America.
Okay.
And that is
gotcha.
its official state nickname for that reason.
I see. Okay, that makes sense. 1876. So then out west, you would think.
Yeah.
So the last hint I'll give you, the name of the state, the real name of the state, was actually given to it because of the views and the different kind of like the visual intake that visitors first experienced passing through it. They thought that it was beautiful for its many colors and kind of different landscapes.
Is it Montana? Because mountains.
It is not, but you're thinking correctly.
Okay.
Okay.
Is it Colorado?
It's Colorado.
Is it?
How is
Oh,
Colorado?
colors!
Yes.
Colores.
Colorado?
Yes. It's the state of
Hey.
place of colors.
Dolores. Yeah,
Yep. Sorry.
that's rough.
And so the story here, which is totally buried lead now, is 1.3 billion gallons of wastewater per day are produced in New York City. That's 7 billion pounds of waste. Until 1986, most of it went untreated directly into the Hudson River. Gross. After which it started to be treated in certain ways. Now it's actually digested, and it gets converted into 125 million gallons of dense sludge, which is a really impressive reduction.
It was always being digested.
Well, yes, and now it's being redigested by bacteria.
Okay.
In a process that we actually mentioned earlier. So the bacteria can take the waste and kind of reduce it, take out a lot of the gases and waters, and filter things out of it, and it become like a dense
And it
sludge
becomes
packet.
Marmite.
Yeah, or close to it. So in 1988, legislation was passed that you could no longer dump things directly into the Hudson River, and
It
so
just sounds like people were taking shits in the Hudson River. You can't take dumps directly into the Hudson.
yeah, and as a result of that legislation, we had to do something else with our other waste. But no, in 1988, what they then started to do was ship it 103 miles off the coast of New York and dump it in the middle of the ocean.
Where it floated right back.
Quite possibly. I think they weighed it down somehow. But in 1992, New York started selling their poop to Colorado. They had been trying for 4 years to find a buyer for their human waste because other cities produce human waste. And milorganite, which is a fertilizer that's sold around the U.S. that's made from biosolid waste, is from the city of Milwaukee's waste. Their city's been selling this stuff as fertilizer, and everyone's like, yeah, that's cool. But New York City tried to sell it, and everyone was like, we don't want city poop. People were legitimately concerned about the types of pathogens and the types of things that would be in it and just levels of metals and toxins. And so no one wanted to buy it until we made a sweet deal for Colorado in which New York City paid for the sometimes hundreds of train car long train from New York City to Colorado daily to sell this like 125 million pounds of poop.
I really like the idea that people didn't want our city poop because it was too metal.
It's really hurtful, but they definitely didn't want their like, middle American kids like eating like New York poop enriched foods and then getting all these radical ideas.
Notions about.
But all of this is detailed again in it. It's actually a Radiolab podcast called The Poop Train. Really fascinating story. So I'd refer people there for more details. But at one point, New York City's poop could completely fertilize 10,000 acres every season in Colorado.
What can I say? We're fertile.
And actually, weirdly, we were because they documented things that it increased crop yields compared to other fertilizers. Aphids hated it, so it got rid of pests. And something called the prairie dogs that used to come in and bother. Oh my God!
Are you kidding me?
Didn't even think about
You
it.
didn't even see that coming. You didn't think of prairie dogs.
Oh no!
Go on, finish your sentence.
I was just gonna say New York City poops prevented prairie dogs, which is clearly not true.
Oh my gosh.
But yeah, that's my quiz, guys. That's it.
Right. Great job.
All right. Thanks for listening, everyone. I hope this episode was worth it for you. That now for the next month of my life, every time I try to type excellent in, it will autocorrect to excrement. So if you want to check out more content, you can find us on Instagram and Twitter at FaxMachinePod and on Facebook at FaxMachinePodcast. You can browse our fancy new website, FaxMachinePodcast.com. You can also find us individually on social media as well. I'm at Whiteboard Rob, Noah,
At Arcs and Sciences.
and Emily,
At _EM Costa.
and our producer Anthony at The Cosmic ACA. This week, tell a friend if you like our podcast, and then bring them to our live show at Caveat in New York City on April 29th. For details on that, check out our fancy new website, FaxMachinePodcast.com. Fax Machine is hosted and written by me, Rob Frawley, Noah Giberson, and Emily Costa. Production and theme music by Anthony Antonelli. Fax Machine is edited by Noah Giberson, and our logo was designed by Mike Zola. Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Bye.
So this is an idea that's not new by any means. I think we've even talked about it a little bit, producing methane. Oof, wine burp, sorry.
Methane
even talked
burp.
about this. Producing methane. Bah, wine burp. Fucking mint.
That's our outtake.
Yep.